everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Roker Report podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. It's Gav again, and you join us ahead of Sunderland's fourth league game of the season away at Portsmouth, a place I absolutely hate going, but given how well we're doing at the minute, I quite fancy it. Joining me is Martin again. Hiya, mate.
Hello, mate. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting pod to do, isn't it? Because we're recording this on Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
With the transfer deadline imminent on Friday night, previewing a game on Saturday. So a lot could change, but hopefully not too much.
Yeah, well, we're banning ourselves from talking about anything to do with transfers just to avoid horrifically dating this podcast in terms of who might leave, who might go and all the rest of it. So if you're tuning in and hoping to hear us give our thoughts on the state of the transfer window, then yeah, you might as well turn off now because it's just nothing to talk about at the minute.
Our brilliant new 50 million quid signing.
Yeah.
We can't talk about him yet.
You might go straight in the team and ruin this. But yeah, we've got Portsmouth at the weekend, and this when I saw the fixtures at the start of the season was an interesting game because generally, I think if you come up against a promoted side early on, it's hard to gauge really what they're going to be like and stuff. But they've drawn 3 games in a row, and they've had some hard games as well, so they're obviously up for it. But I think when you look at the fixtures at the start of the season, you may be looking at this one and think, that's possibly one where we need to go and get 3 points. However, it's Portsmouth, and as I said before, basically for as long as I can remember, it's been somewhere that's just been a horrible place to go. Particularly in League One, it was awful, wasn't it? I hate every time we play, you'd say, "Oh God, Portsmouth." It's one of them games, isn't it? You don't really fancy it. And I remember, I've always got the two that sort of stand out of the playoff game when their fans were just trying to fill our players in, and the one where it chucked it down and probably should have been called off and we got battered.
Yeah,
they're the first two that come to mind. Obviously, I'm probably just highlighting the negatives there. We possibly went there and got some good wins over the last few years. I can't remember, but it is one where I look at it and I'm like, ugh, I don't really fancy this one. However, like I said, given our start of the season, you've got to fancy us to at least get a point or something there, which I think even would feel a little bit disappointing at this stage, wouldn't it? Given how we've started and we've beat everyone in our path and managed to make some good sides look poor, it would possibly be a little disappointing if we came away with anything but a win. But it's a hard one to call, this, isn't it?
I think in the context of the season, given that we've got 3 out of 3 so far, it takes the pressure off us a little bit, doesn't it? Because I think if we'd gone into to this game, which we could have gone into it with 1 point or 2 points or 4 points, it would be very easy looking at our start of the season to think that we might be going into this quite desperate for a win or needing a win just to kind of get the season kicked off to some extent. And it's going to be a real test for the Briss, isn't it? It's actually really interesting how we actually go about it, because I think it's actually a completely different challenge to what he's faced so far. And as you say, Portsmouth have had, on paper, you look, Portsmouth got 3 points out of 3 games, but they've actually had a tough start fixture-wise. They had Leeds away on the opening day, and they only drew that with a last-minute equaliser from Leeds. They played Luton at home, 0-0, and that was against 10 men for the vast majority of that game. So they played against 10 men, couldn't manage to get through Luton. And then they played Borough and drew, again, last-minute equaliser for Borough to stop them getting all 3 points. So very easily we could be going in this game with Portsmouth on 7 points, having beaten Leeds away and Borough away. And if that had been the case, you're kind of going, oh shit, maybe I'll take a draw rather than expect to win. But it's a tight ground. It's a big, loud crowd, noisy crowd. We kind of need Lee Catmull back for just a game, just to give 1 or 2 fans, put them in the
maybe
place.
Just to steward it, stand on the sidelines and push them away if they get close.
Could find some use for them, couldn't we? But look, I think it's really interesting in terms of how we approach it, because as I say, I think it's going to be a completely different test to what we faced so far. And Lebris has talked about finding solutions to problems on the field, finding different solutions to different problems in the game. And I think we're going to have to find some different answers compared to the problems that we've been faced with in the 3 games so far.
Yeah, there again, like I said, they're a weird case because you look at the team. I was looking at sort of the lineups that have been sticking out in the last few games. Like I look at it on paper, and nothing really stands out there. But obviously, you've got to be good to get out of League One. We know that it's a difficult, horrible league, so you've got to have something about you to be able to even do that. But it's not, you find with a lot of promoted teams that they are greater than the sum of their parts. It's not like they've got a a load of individuals who are just going to win them games out of nothing. There's not anything like that when it comes to Portsmouth. And you've got to give their manager credit, actually, John Mousinho, because you think we had a slog in the third tier, but they actually dropped to League Two and spent a lot longer in the lower reaches than we did. And we've kind of gone past them and got promoted, and then they've had another couple of years in League One. And the Portsmouth, for sort of League One, League Two standard, they're a big club. You know, they won the FA Cup not that long ago. They were playing in Europe under Harry Redknapp, and you know the expectations of the fans might have been tempered somewhat with just having to spend that long outside of the top two divisions. But they're still a club with big expectations. Their fans won't be going into the season thinking they just want to stay up. They'll be wanting to compete. And to be fair, when you look at the results they've picked up so far, I mean, yeah, Luton and Middlesbrough haven't had the greatest of starts, to be fair. But even still, those when they saw the fixtures, they'll have looked at that and went, Middlesbrough away is not an easy game. They've getting a point from possibly should have won that game, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, they're not going to be mugs. Their best player at the minute, unfortunately, he picked up something got picked up on a scan, I think, during the summer, Colby Bishop, and with his heart, and he's out having had surgery on his heart. So that must be a massive blow. Massive blow to a lot, because he was their top scorer last year. But then they've put a young kid in. I think the name's pronounced Saidi, and he got 2 at the weekend. So, like I say, they're possibly greater than some of their parts. A little bit like us, really. We've lost Jack Clark, and you just slot somebody in. The team unit as a whole manages to carry on. I've read a little bit about the way they play. Apparently, they like to keep the ball, break when they can, counter-attacking football. That kind of lends itself to being a good game, because that's two teams who like to play the same way, really. I was looking through some of the statistics so far this season. It's been 50-50, kind of, where they've had the ball for large swathes of games, and then some of the other ones, like Luton away, they absolutely battered Luton possession-wise. And then this Middlesbrough game, I don't think they had much of the ball at all. So, yeah, really interesting game, because I never know how to judge promoted teams. It's really difficult to, especially 3 or 4 games into the season, to sit here and say definitively what to expect. I think a big thing we've got to be wary of is the fact that when a team comes up having been used to winning as often as they have, their confidence is still there. Like, they haven't lost yet, so their confidence won't have taken that much of a knock from drawn 3 games. They're probably really disappointed having had basically the victory snatched away from them in the last minute at Middlesbrough with that penalty. But at the same time, they'll still be pretty confident, you would think, coming out of last season, won't they? And it's the same manager, largely the same group of players. They're going to be very together on the pitch. I actually think this might be the toughest game we've had so far, just based on the fact that they've got very little to lose going into this, have they? And we're top of the table now, and we're trying to set the expectation for the rest of the season. Like, genuinely, if it's very, very early to be saying this, but if we do have our sights set on promotion and finishing really high in the table, you've got to win games like this. You've got to go to places like Portsmouth and grind out wins, not necessarily dominate the game all the way through, because that's tough to do, but go away to places like Portsmouth, Plymouth, QPR, playing Middlesbrough even. These games where you're like, you might have to dig in a little bit, but still come away with the 3 points. It's got that feel about it for me. And I think you mentioned something before there about how Labrie kind of approaches the game. I don't think he'll change his approach at all. I think he'll basically do what's worked all through the season so far. But in terms of what he's not been happy with, particularly when you think about the away from home performances, like Cardiff, he wasn't happy that we let them have so much of the ball. He wasn't happy the other day against Burnley when we maybe stepped off a little bit with the intensity after the first half an hour. So whilst we've had a brilliant start, how he approaches this is interesting, but I don't think he'll change too much.
I think the point that you made about Portsmouth kind of coming up with momentum is really valid, and I think it's the second home game they've had, and I think they're still going to be on that bit of crest of a wave, aren't they, from promotion? Mm-hmm. So it's a different task. You never really want to go away to promoted clubs this early in the season. Ideally, if you can kind of pick it, you'd go around Christmas or early New Year. But they came up with 97 points. I think they've only lost once since January, and they've only lost 3 home games in the past 12 months. So it's not going to be an easy game. Their fans are used to winning. The team's used to winning at home. And look, we're going to have to go there and find the right answers. But whether it's going to be interesting whether we actually do change that style of play a little bit, or whether we see some development of it. Because, as you say, when you look at like the Portsmouth stats from the games this season, it's actually hard to really sort of pinpoint what they're about. If you kind of look at the two away games, they've let the opposition have possession. They've made fewer than half the passes that the home team's made. So they've let the other team have possession and try to hit them on the break. When you look at the highlights, the hoofing long balls up to the big striker, who, by the way, had only ever scored 2 goals for Portsmouth before the Borough game, and he scored 2 against Borough, and that's the sort of thing that would happen to us normally, wouldn't it? Where you've got the law of Akinbaye, haven't you? Where the striker who hasn't scored very many or for ages will come and haunt us. But yeah, look, I watched the highlights of the Borough game, and they're long throws, balls from the back. They're not playing it around the back to give us that chance to press potentially. So it'll be interesting to see how they actually play at home compared to how they've played away. And if we're not allowed to press, if we're not given the opportunity to press, that puts a different focus, I guess, on what we do in terms of defence. We've got some team selection issues, which I actually don't think, and this is famous last words, so I'm going to touch my desk here and touch wood.
I'm doing it too.
But I don't think anything that'll happen next 3 days will affect our starting lineup. So no, I don't see anybody going out who is a key player for us. And I don't see anybody coming in going straight into the first team. So obviously our selection issues for Saturday, Dan Neil, who's suspended after his red card against Burnley. And I think Alese has picked up an injury by all accounts, which is going to rule him out for a little bit. So, if we are going to be up against a physical battle, it's going to be interesting to see how we actually approach that. Obviously, you'd think Ballard is a straight shoe-in for Alese, but I think we'll kind of miss Dan Neil's defensive work in midfield because I think he's, he hasn't had the best of starts of the season, Dan Neil, but I think he's kind of done a lot defensively and scrappy. That's kind of helped build a platform for Brown and Rigg and Job to really get involved in the game. So I think there's a few things to figure out for Labris in terms of team selection, isn't there?
There is, yeah, and it might be a little bit of a blessing in disguise that you go away to a team like Portsmouth who tight pitch, tight little ground, like you said, they go back to front quite quickly at times, although they do like to keep the ball. That you bring in somebody with the quality of Dan Ballard, who's just brilliant in the air, a brilliant defender. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Sunderland's depth, but when you've just said there, Aji Alese, for me, I think he's been brilliant since the season started. And then Dan Neil, your captain, you can bring in Dan Ballard and Alan Brown to replace them. It's like, there is depth there.
Yeah.
We might not be at sort of the level that maybe Leicester had last season or that some of the relegated teams have got in terms of depth. But we still got depth. We still got really good players to come in. Like, I don't actually worry about the fact that those 2 players have to come in. I quite like it. I think well, it's a good opportunity. Do you know what I mean? It gives Alan Brown a chance to prove himself, because we've talked in the last couple of weeks about how, just given how well Chris Riggs played, you can't really see a way into the team for Brown, and then there you go, there's a suspension. Yeah. This is how things work. Stuff crops up that you don't expect. I mean, I probably kind of expected Aji Alese to get injured at some point because his record of staying fit isn't great, and it's such a shame, isn't it? But at the same time, Dan Ballard is a fantastic player to bring in and to give us something a little bit different to what Alese did. And him and Luke O'Nien are well aware of each other. That's a partnership that I'm not worried about. It's it's all right. It's all right. We're going to have these issues. We're going to hit bumps in the road. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be suspensions. And we have to be prepared for it, And Dan Ballard played a good chunk of the game on Monday for the under-21s, and he'll be, happy that he got some minutes in because he hasn't really played. I think it was midway through sort of pre-season, wasn't it, when he picked up his injury? So he'll be happy to get them minutes. He's going to get chucked straight in because I can't imagine we'll go with Leo Hjelde. So it'll be Dan Ballard in with 09. Like say, Alan Brown in for Dan Neil, and we might get to see a different side to Alan Brown because he's not necessarily a more defence-minded player, but I wouldn't say Dan Neil is really. I think he's kind of been honed into that role over the last couple of seasons, but I wouldn't say his strengths are as a defensive midfielder, but as a result of the exposure he's had in that position, he's got better and better, and it's going to be really good to see what Alan Brown can do. And it's quite interesting, Pierre Ekwa's been a virtual ever-present over the last season and a half or whatever for the first team, and I'm not even considering the fact that he might come in. So because as you said before, he's not part of that first team at the minute. He might well be gone by the time the game comes around, but it just shows you, like I say, the depth we've got. We've got good players coming in, and I don't think we'll really skip a beat when it comes to the flow of the team as a result.
No. Here's one for you. So I think Brown will come in, and I think it'll be interesting whether Job actually plays deeper or Brown plays deeper. Actually, wouldn't be surprised if it's Job that plays
might
deeper.
Might be both,
or
might be both.
Both drop back. What about Triantis?
Well, he was brought on towards the end of the Burnley game, wasn't he?
He was. There? He's brought on against Burnley to play there. In a away game where you're going to be up against it, you've got to dig in and dig deep. Having either Brown or Rigg to bring off the bench for the last 30 minutes to add a little bit of creativity and spark, I don't think it's probably that far from Labrissa's mind to chuck Triantis in there,
Maybe, like I said, I don't know enough about Alan Brown, so everything we've heard about him is that he's more of a sort of box-to-box midfielder, an 8. But I think he'd be disappointed if we were picking a really an unproven centre-half and holding midfield ahead of him. I think that would, I'm not sure about that. But I wouldn't be totally against the idea. Like if the team was picked and I saw Triantis playing in the midfield, I wouldn't be sort of against the idea. I just think, maybe the natural pecking order would see Brown come in. I think you're right though. Maybe to accommodate for Neil being missing, and just because we're away from home, we might actually see Job sitting a little bit deeper, because he in the home games on the big pitch and stuff, he kind of drifts from playing in alongside Neil to joining in with Rigg further up the pitch, doesn't he? It'll be interesting. I think there will be a little bit of a rejigging just in terms of where players sit and move and stuff. But when you consider the press that we've deployed so far this season, I wouldn't be trying to change too much. And I think Brown can possibly play that role. Given he's played 400 odd games in the Championship,
I'm sure
he will have at some point played in front of the back four and done it to a decent standard, I would imagine. So yeah, I think you've got a point. He could do it, but I would worry about the message that sends to someone you've really sold the dream to bring in. There's someone like, in someone like Alan Brown, if you then picked nothing against Triantis, but
it depends, right? It depends if Brown does start on the bench in that scenario, or he comes in for Rigg. Because I think Rigg will be treated a little bit differently to what Bellingham was treated last season. I think Rigg will come in for a spell, drop out for a couple of games, come back in, and look, Brown's definitely been sold the position of Sunderland as a first team player. He's part of the leadership group, or whatever they call it, isn't he? I think he's probably second or third in line for the captain's armband when that's available. So I reckon Brown will start. And look, I do think Bellingham, Brown, and Rigg will start the game, but I do think there's an argument for Triantis, and I would actually probably think it's in place of Rigg for this game.
Maybe later in the game, that's possibly the plan. If we're ahead, we need to maybe just grind a little, because Rigg never finishes a game, does he? Usually he's kind of brought off towards the end. So I could see a scenario where we start with Rigg and then bring someone like Triantis on later in the game, maybe.
I'm keen to see Triantis. I am keen to see actually Triantis play in that central midfield role, because he got pretty good rap from the Hibs fans, didn't he? Last season. And you remember that free kick he took, where he knocked two of his own players out.
I wouldn't mind saying that. Maybe Portsmouth players though.
Yeah, you have to get Portsmouth players instead of his own players, but he's got some welly.
I think we could be proven wrong. We said we weren't going to talk about transfers, but I'll touch on this briefly. Like with Triantis, he's one I maybe saw going out, but if Alese is injured, it changes things a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah,
I don't think there's a chance.
Other than that, really, what about up front? Would you do anything with maybe the new striker Isidore coming in for my ender?
I think he's got to.
Yeah,
I think he's got to. I think you brought somebody in who's been playing regularly this season, so it's not as if I think with Mendy, and again, not talking about transfers, but regardless whether he comes in or not, he's not trained or something. So it's not a scenario where we're bringing in somebody who's not had a pre-season. Isidore's had a pre-season. He's been playing regularly. Come in, he's match fit, ready to go. And I just think Mayenda's performance on Saturday compared to the week previous showed that he's not ready for regular football. Again, like I said in the pod the other day, I think the stat was he touched the ball once in the first half against Burnley, when we were on top for so long, we were attacking for so long, and he just couldn't get involved in the game. So I think Isidore will come in and start. And I actually don't think that's unfair on Mayenda. I think it's probably the right call. I think he's actually probably done a little bit better than we thought he might. He's obviously got the 2 goals against Sheff Wed. Having him to bring off the bench, 20 minutes left, again, good option to have. But I'd be a little bit surprised if Isidore didn't start. I think he's obviously been brought to play a regular role. And it's kind of interesting, isn't it, with some of the players that we've brought in. Brown's obviously been brought in to play. I think Isidore's been brought in to play. So we'll see how they get settled in. And, it would be a great game for him to come in. I guess the option is that we kind of leave anybody else until after the international break, isn't it? Give them 3 weeks to settle in, travel with the squad, be on the bench, have a look, and then really hit the straps after the international break. But I think I would not be surprised at all to see Isidore start. What do you think?
Yeah, I would bring him straight in. I just kind of the feeling I get from his attitude, already it's rubbing off. He looks really enthusiastic. It's not like the typical new signing where you're a little bit worried about them settling in. He looks like he's settled straight in. Noticed he was in the crowd for the under-21s game the other night with a few of the players as well. But on that, I thought it was interesting he wasn't involved, because they might have looked at him and said, right, because it's Monday, you've got 4 days till the next game after that. 4 days of recovery, then going into Saturday. Maybe they would have given him like 45 minutes just to see where he's at, but he's obviously fit. If he wasn't fit, they would have played him in that game. And I think the fact that he wasn't involved suggests to me that he's going to be starting this weekend. And something you said there about Mayenda was absolutely right. I think he's probably done a little bit better than we expected, but you've got to remember how inexperienced he is. He's just a kid, with everybody else we've got around that age. You do sometimes have to take a step back, take a breath. Like those 2 goals against Sheff Wed were fantastic, but we've brought in a lad who's got a proven scoring record, albeit outside of England. But he's already scored goals this season. He's 24-year-old. I think we've got to maybe take a view on that and think, okay, he's possibly the better option at the minute. And again, like I said with Brown, we'd have sold a dream to Isidore about what we want from him this season, and he's not moved halfway across the world to just sit on the bench. He's come here to play games. I think, given what we've seen from Mayenda so far this season, it might feel a little bit harsh to take him out the team. But I don't think he'll complain. I think he knows the crack. He's going to be protected this season. Given how long it's taken us to recruit a striker, he's probably had more chances than he expected. When he was away on loan at Hibs last year, he won't have been thinking, I'm going to be starting every game for Sunderland at start next season, because he couldn't even get a game for Hibs. Yeah. So, I'm sure he'll be disappointed, but he'll also be fairly motivated to just take his chances when he gets them. And I think away from home, a little bit more experience up there would be more valuable. And, it's not like Isidore's a bloody 300-game experienced veteran, but he's played a lot of football, a lot more than Mayenda has in his career. Like I said, he's already scored goals this season, so there's the confidence from that. He'll be eager. And I just kind of think of the Cardiff game, Mayenda got snuffed out a little bit. Yeah. Because the home team had they had 2 big centre-halves and they just bullied him, really. And I think Portsmouth would probably try and do the same with him, where Isidore looks a little bit more physical. But again, we haven't seen anything of him in the Sunderland shirt, so it could be totally different come Saturday. But yeah, I fancy him to actually get off with a good start and get a goal on his first game. I don't know.
Nice, wouldn't it?
Good feeling about this one. A little bit like when we signed Jibril Cisse and Darren Bent. When we signed them, and you just kind of felt confident that we'd come straight in and do stuff. Yeah. I don't know why. I've just got this really good feeling about him. It's a great position to come into, though, as a goal scorer. Team which is playing really well, defending really well, but importantly scoring goals. It's not like you're coming in when the team's lost three on the bounce and desperate for confidence, and maybe sort of the ingenuity and the flow of the team and everything isn't as good. With this, it's like you're coming into a team which is absolutely bouncing. So I think great situation for him to come into, and I'd be shocked if he doesn't start.
Yeah, I'd be surprised as well. I think it's great opportunity to come in and score a goal. I think was it Nicky Sumby? I reckon Nicky Sumby scored on his debut for Sunderland against Portsmouth down in Fratton Park. Mm-hmm. So there's an omen for you if you're into that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I say, I'm racking my brains to think of times we've won down there, like in recent years.
Hasn't been for a while.
Nah, I can't remember. I remember going there, I think we won 3-1 when Callum Davenport played an unbelievable right-footed cross for Kenwyne Jones. Do you remember that one? It was a midweek game. I think we won 3-1, but I'm really struggling other than that. But yeah, you know, it's not traditionally been a happy hunting ground for us, but given the way we've started the season, not even sort of fazed by the fact we've got good players coming out, because, you know, Jack Clark came out the team last week and we coped fine with that, so I'm sure we'll cope okay with Aji Alese and Dan Neil being missing. I fancy us to win, like, I do. I think it'll be tight, though. I'm going to go with a 2-1. I think Portsmouth will score. I think that might be that. We can't carry on keeping clean sheets, surely. It's not going to be like 4 on the bounce. At some point, we've got to crack at the back, and maybe the sort of the shift in personnel with Alese coming out, maybe that'll cause a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of a change in there. But yeah, I think generally, though, we're going to be okay. I'm going with 2-1. Fancy Isidore to get off the mark, and Job hasn't scored yet, so I fancy them two to get our goals. I think we'll come from behind as well. I fancy Portsmouth to maybe take the lead, and then we get 2 second half goals.
Lose our clean sheet record, eh?
Yeah. I just don't think we can keep that going forever. What about you?
I do think we'll win. I reckon we'll keep a clean sheet. I'll go for another.
Hope you're right.
A 2-0. But you know, the last time that we went down to Portsmouth, as you say, it was that rain game that, you know, should never have been started. Never mind have been called off. Where we
got images of Leon Diaku thrashing around in the water as the ball wouldn't move from.
Unbelievable. But we played them. I only just remember this game by looking it up. I've got no recollection of it at all, but I've recalled it now. I say it, but we won 2-0 the previous season behind closed doors. Jordan Jones came on and scored. It was a 2-0 game.
I vaguely remember that, yeah.
Hey, listen, the team: Lee Burge, Max Power, Callum McFadzean, Carl Winchester, Dion Sanderson, Luke O'Nien, Jordan Jones, Josh Gowan, Charlie White, Aidan O'Brien, and Aidan McGeady.
Freaking hell.
So,
how many years ago was that?
3.
3 years since we were fielding that team in League One.
3 years ago.
You do have to remind yourself sometimes of how far we've come.
Yes.
Like, you know, people kind of forget, bloody hell, that was our team not long ago, 3 years ago. Every time I hear some of them, I shudder when I hear some of them names. And Callum McFadzean.
That's the one, like, isn't it? But the victory, the time that before that we won at Fratton Park was the game where somebody came off the bench and scored. So it was 97, and we won 4-1. So we'd gone from 97 to 2021 without wins. So we only had one win there in the best part of 30 years.
So I don't know why, though. I don't get it. Why have they got such a hold on us? It's well, I guess you could maybe argue the crowd, because the one time we've won since sort of recently has been with no fans in.
Yeah.
But I still, even despite all of that, I fancy us to win. I just think you've got to take note of our confidence. Portsmouth are going to be up for it. I'm sure they'll give us a tough game. They've given everyone a tough game so far. But I just think we've got more quality than they do, and that should hopefully tell. Fingers crossed. Now, I haven't predicted many wins in the last year, I think, on this podcast, so that might not be a good thing. But yeah, 2-1, I'm going with them. What do you say again?
2-0.
2-0.
I reckon.
Well, so blame us when we lose, anyways, because we both went for a win.
I'm just trying to find that game that Callum Davenport.
2009, 2010? Yeah, it was around that time. 2009, 2010.
I got beat 3-1.
Oh, we got beat 3-1. I'm saying we won. Friggin' hell.
I was looking for that elusive other victory in that run. I couldn't find it. Now we got beat. I just
remember the goal. It was like Callum Davenport, who barely played for us and was a centre half, put one of the best crosses in I've ever seen. You mentioned Summerby. It was like a Summerby cross from the right hand side, kind of really deep cross with loads of pace on, and Kenwyne Jones ran onto it.
It was.
I remember it was on Sky and it was midweek, if I remember rightly.
We took the lead
on the telly.
Just on the hour, and then we conceded immediately. Phil Bardsley scored an own goal to make it 2-1 to Portsmouth, and we conceded one right at the end to make it 3-1. Ricky Sprazier. It was a Ricky Sprazier era.
Yeah, dark times. I don't like to remember them. It was just a boring season, that, wasn't it? It was poor. Sort of the post-Roy Keane era where we just about survived.
That was another one where we kind of pretty much wrote off the second half of the season.
Well, let's hope it's a happier hunting ground this weekend. Like I said, we've tried to avoid transfer talk. I think there's been a couple of little mentions. We are going to be back with a podcast after Portsmouth, but most importantly, Friday night, during the final hours of the deadline, we will be live over on Twitter, doing a live podcast on Twitter Spaces, on the Roker Report Twitter page. Make sure you catch us there. We'll be reacting to everything as it happens. Hopefully there'll be a few incomings. I think it will be a case of a lot of outgoings and loans and all the rest of it, but it should be pretty busy, I think, on the final day. I think there'll be a lot of players going out, so make sure you join us for that, just because we all know that when you watch Sky Sports on deadline day, it's nowhere near as dramatic or as interesting as they like to try and make it, because there's very little usually goes on. So maybe stick that on the background, put it on mute, stick us on Twitter on your tablet or your phone or your laptop and listen to the lads have a bit crack. And also you can join in as well if you've never been on a Twitter space before. It's basically a live podcast, live show. There'll be a few of us on from Roker Report, but over the course of the 3 hours, there'll be plenty of opportunities for people to request to speak and come on and have their say about things. We'll not just be talking about transfers, we'll be talking about everything going on. We'll be talking about the Portsmouth game, the start of the season. We'll be, like I say, reacting to transfer news as it's going on. Hopefully by that point we'll have a few players in, new players to talk about. So make sure you catch us on that. That should be fun. Cheers, Martin. Thanks, mate, once again.
Thank you very much. I think if anybody had said we haven't talked about any incoming transfer targets, but we've mentioned Callum Davenport 4 times, the odds against that would have been pretty high at the start of recording, wouldn't it? So there you go.
Exactly, yeah. Cheers, mate. Thanks, everyone. Make sure you catch up with the latest from Roker Report on rokerreport.sbnation.com as the week goes on. We'll be reacting to everything in terms of transfers and the Pompey game and all the rest of it as the week goes on. And we will be back with a proper podcast after the Portsmouth game. Hopefully, fingers crossed, touching wood and all the rest of it, talking about a 4th Sunderland win in a row in the Championship, remaining top of the table. Let's see how it goes. We'll catch you later.